Listen, children and adults, and let me tell you a tale from the city of Aruna, where the river glittered like a silver thread beneath the sun. In that proud city stood the Palace of Industry, vast, golden, and filled with merchants who weighed every word as they weighed their gold. Within its shining halls lived a janitor named Ravi. Ravi rose before dawn, sweeping marble floors so clean that the pillars reflected in them. He never complained, though his wages were few and his hands raw. Every morning he whispered a promise to himself. One day, I will rise by my own honesty. But among the polished shoes and perfumed laughter walked Mira, the HR manager of the palace. Her tongue was sharp, her pride taller than the towers themselves. She believed power and worth were born from titles, not toil. One humid afternoon, Ravi handed her a parchment, a humble job application for an apprentice manager's role. Mira read it once, then burst into laughter so loud that even the guards turned. You? A janitor among leaders? She sneered, tearing the parchment in half. Ravi bowed silently, gathering the torn pieces. But in his eyes burned something stronger than shame, the quiet fire of destiny. The laughter did not end with that moment. By sunset, Myra's mockery spread through the corridors like wildfire. Clerks whispered, messengers chuckled. Even the cooks grinned when Ravi passed. Still, he swept. He cleaned the very hall where he had been humiliated, polishing the golden tiles that had reflected her laughter. That night, under the lantern light, Ravi sat by the river's edge. The waters of Aruna shimmered like molten glass. He looked into the currents and whispered, River, you flow past palaces and huts alike. Tell me, am I foolish to dream? The river murmured back, brushing reeds against his feet. And though he could not hear words, his heart sensed meaning. Those who bow today may stand tallest tomorrow. As he sat in silence, an old figure approached. Elder Sajan, the palace gardener. His beard was white as foam, his hands lined like riverbeds. Dreams mocked by pride, said Sajan, often grow the deepest roots. Leave this place, Ravi. The world beyond the gates may hold the chance your heart seeks. Ravi looked back at the palace lights, then toward the open road. Between pride and purpose, he chose purpose. By dawn, the janitor was gone. The road beyond Aruna wound through misty plains and sleepy villages. Ravi walked barefoot, earning his bread by sweeping courtyards, repairing wells, and teaching children letters he once copied secretly from palace scrolls. In each village, people asked, What brings you here, traveler? And he always answered, To learn what work truly means. Years passed like drifting leaves. The once humble janitor became a builder of hearts. He taught villagers to trade fairly, to share harvests, to mend disputes with words instead of fists. Word spread of a man called Ravi the Restorer. Some said his broom could sweep away misfortune itself, but he never stayed long in one place. When a hearth burns bright, he'd say, I move to the next that lies in darkness. Meanwhile, in Aruna, the Palace of Industry began to crumble within. Merchants quarreled, greed replaced honor, and the council lost the trust of the people. One fateful evening, a royal messenger arrived at Sajan's hut by the palace wall. By order of the late king, he proclaimed, a new chief steward shall be chosen, one who understands both labor and leadership. The sealed parchment bore a name few remembered, Ravi of Aruna. At dawn, a procession entered the city. Merchants straightened their robes, guards lined the gates, and whispers filled the air. The new chief steward arrives today. Mira stood at the palace balcony, older now but still proud. Her life had grown comfortable. She had risen in rank but not in wisdom. Yet when she heard the name Ravi, her laughter froze in her throat. Could it be that same janitor? Impossible. The gates opened. A man stepped forward, tall, calm, dressed in simple robes of deep blue. His hair carried silver threads, his eyes the color of still water. Around his neck hung a small wooden charm, shaped like a broom. He bowed to the crowd, and when he lifted his head, silence fell. It was him. Years have carried me far, he said gently, but I have returned to serve the people who first taught me humility. Inside, Myra's heart raced. The hall that once rang with her laughter now echoed with his voice, calm, commanding, kind. That afternoon, he stood before the council and declared, "Justice shall be the first task of this office." And somewhere deep inside, Mira trembled, for justice remembers everything. The first days of Ravi's rule changed the air itself. Servants were greeted, not ordered. Wages rose, and the sick received rest instead of reprimand. He walked among the workers, asking their names, listening to their burdens. The palace that had once glittered coldly now shone with warmth. Mira watched all this in silence, confusion twisting her pride. How could a janitor command such loyalty? Even the haughtiest merchant lowered his gaze in Ravi's presence. One evening, Ravi summoned all senior officers to the Grand Hall. "Tomorrow," he announced, "I will share the new vision for our palace." Whispers spread like wind through wheat. Mira spent the night pacing, memories of her cruelty returning with every echo of his name. At dawn, the hall filled with expectant faces. Ravi stood upon the dais, holding an ancient broom, polished, gleaming, the very one he once used in these halls. He said, "This broom taught me more about leadership than any throne. For he who serves with his hands learns how to rule with his heart." The crowd fell silent. Then Ravi's gaze found Myra's. "And now, I will tell you a story, my story." Mira felt her chest tighten as Ravi spoke. His voice was calm, but each word struck like a temple bell. "I once worked within these walls," he began. "I swept these very floors. I dreamed of serving with more than my broom, but I was mocked, laughed at, torn down. That laughter built my resolve. No one dared breathe." Myra's fingers curled around her robe. Ravi lifted the broom. "This tool," he said softly, "once swept away dust. Today, it sweeps away pride." He turned toward the assembly. "Let no rank make one's soul smaller than another. From this day forth, every laborer in this palace will have a voice." Applause erupted, cautious at first, then thunderous. Yet Mira could not move. She knew everyone understood who had once laughed. When the crowd dispersed, Ravi approached her quietly. "Mira," he said, "the palace needs honesty more than apologies. You will remain, but your task will change." Her heart sank. "What task?" He smiled gently. "To oversee humility itself. Starting tomorrow, you will join the workers whose worth you once mocked." Mira bowed her head, her pride breaking like thin ice. At sunrise, Mira arrived in plain robes. The workers stared, the proud HR manager now among them. Some smirked, others pitted. Her first duty was sweeping the courtyard. The broom felt heavy in her hands. She worked awkwardly, her back aching, her heart raw with shame. But Ravi's voice echoed in her mind. Service is the first step to understanding. Days turned into weeks. Her hands blistered, her laughter faded. Yet slowly, something inside her changed. She began to see beauty in the rhythm of honest labor. The way sunlight danced on clean tiles, the shared smiles of tired workers at dusk. One evening, an old cleaner named Bala handed her water. "You're learning fast," he said kindly. "You remind me of someone who once swept beside me, a dreamer named Ravi." Mira froze, then smiled faintly. He dreamed still, only now for us all. That night she returned home and wept, not from pain, but from awakening. The pride she once carried had turned into understanding. And somewhere beyond her window, the river hummed its quiet song of forgiveness. Seasons changed. Under Ravi's leadership, the palace became a haven of fairness. Merchants shared profits with artisans. Servants were honored at feasts. One afternoon, Elder Sajan visited Mira in the courtyard. He watched her sweep, nodding with approval. "The river has taught you its rhythm," he said. Mira bowed. "I was blind, Elder. Pride made me cruel, but humility showed me color again." Sajan smiled. "Then you're ready for the final test." That evening, Ravi called her to his chamber. "Mira," he said, "the council questions our reforms. They believe mercy weakens power. Tomorrow, they will demand proof that kindness can rule." "What must I do?" she asked. "Stand beside me," Ravi answered. "And when they speak, Speak not as one who mocked, but as one reborn." The next morning, the grand hall filled with nobles. Their voices rose like thunder. "Your generosity will ruin us," they cried. Mira stepped forward. Her voice, once sharp with pride, now rang steady and clear. "Mercy is not weakness," she declared. "It is the only strength that lasts." The hall fell silent, and the river outside swelled, as if listening. The council of merchants glared at Ravi. Their jewels flashed like knives beneath the torchlight. "Chief Steward," barked Lord Darren, the fattest among them, "we built this palace through profit, not pity. Your generosity drains our coffers." Murmurs of agreement rippled across the hall. But Ravi stood calm, his hands resting lightly on the broom beside his chair. "My lords," he said gently, "the palace is not built by walls or wealth, but by those who keep it standing. If you pay your builders with scorn, your foundation will crack." Laughter erupted, cold, cruel, mocking. It was the same sound he had once endured as a janitor. But this time, Ravi did not bow. He raised the broom, pointing to the shining floor beneath them. "These stones gleam because humble hands cared for them. Would you let such hands starve?" Mira watched, trembling. His voice carried truth like thunder wrapped in silk. Lord Darren sneered. "You speak like a dreamer, not a leader." "Then may your greed wake you," Ravi said softly. The council fell silent. Something in his gaze made even their gold lose its luster. But Darren was not a man to forget humiliation, and shadows began to gather. That night, the council met in secret chambers lit by a single flickering lamp. Darren paced, his rings clicking together. "This janitor king humiliates us," he hissed. "He will strip us of power if we let him continue." One merchant whispered, "But the people love him. If we act against him, they may revolt." Darren smirked. "Then we will not strike him. We will stain him. We will make his virtue look like vice." By dawn, rumors crawled through the city like snakes. They said Ravi had stolen gold from the treasury to feed his workers. They said he sought to crown himself king. Mira heard the whispers and ran to him. "They plot against you," she warned, breathless. Ravi only smiled sadly. "Truth needs no defense, Mira. But lies, they drown only when the river of time rises." Still, he sent Sajjan to watch the merchants' movements. "Greed," he said, "is clever but never patient." That night, as rain began to fall, a sealed letter appeared at Ravi's door. Inside was a single line written in gold ink. "A broom can sweep dust, but not disgrace." He folded it carefully, eyes calm. "So, they will test me through shadows," he murmured. "Then let light answer." The next morning, the merchant called for a public inquiry. Crowds gathered in the courtyard, murmuring anxiously. Ravi walked forward without guards, only his broom in hand. Lord Darren announced, "This man has stolen from the palace treasury under the guise of charity. Let him explain himself before the people." Ravi stood silent as murmurs grew into gasps. Then he spoke. "You say I stole gold? Come then and see what I have built." He led them beyond the gates, through muddy roads, to the workers' quarter, once dark and broken, now alive with laughter. Small houses gleamed freshly white, gardens bloomed, and children played with new books in hand. "These walls," said Ravi, "were built by the very gold you claim I stole. The palace gave it freely to its people, for their labor built your luxury." The crowd roared in approval. Even guards nodded in pride. Darren's face reddened like fire. But when the council dispersed, he whispered to his followers, "He wins the hearts of fools. Tomorrow, he shall lose everything." Mira saw hatred growing behind his jeweled smile, the kind that strikes not in anger, but in cunning. That night, Sajjan entered Ravi's chamber, rain dripping from his cloak. "They plan to frame you," he said gravely. "Darren will place stolen gold in your quarters before dawn." Ravi sighed softly. "Then I shall give them what they seek, but not as they expect." Before sunrise, Ravi gathered the servants. "Today," he announced, "we clean the entire palace from vault to rooftop. Nothing shall remain hidden." When Darren and the council arrived, ready to expose him, they found the palace gates wide open. Workers lined every hall, holding trays of dust, debris, and from one corner, a small box of gold coins. Ravi bowed. Ah, you found it. Strange that this box lay near your private chamber, my lord. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Darren's mouth fell open. Ravi's voice grew solemn. When we sweep together, truth rises like air, and deceit sinks like mud. The merchants had no words. The people began to chant, Ravi, Ravi. Humiliated, Darren fled into the rain, vowing revenge. Sajan touched Ravi's shoulder. You handled it with grace. Ravi shook his head. Grace is easy. Forgiveness will be harder. Days turned to weeks, peace returning like soft sunlight. Yet Ravi knew Darren's envy still burned somewhere unseen. Meanwhile, Myra's heart grew lighter. She worked beside the servants with sincerity, earning their friendship. She often watched Ravi, marveling at his calm. One evening, she approached him by the riverside. You could have destroyed Darren completely, she said. Why did you spare him? Ravi smiled faintly. Because I once begged for mercy and received none. I will not repeat that cruelty. She looked into the flowing river. Do you ever wish for vengeance? Never, he said. The river does not fight the stones in its path. It wears them down with patience. His words settled deep in her heart. But fate had not finished testing them. Far away, Darren met with travelers from the northern hills, men who dealt in poisons and plots. If I cannot stain his name, Darren hissed, I will silence it. The strangers nodded, taking his coin. In the still night, the moon hid behind clouds. And in the palace, a single candle flickered beside Ravi's bed, its flame bending as though warning of what approached. The assassination came with a whisper of steel. Near midnight, shadows slipped through the corridors, silent as smoke. The guards had been bribed. The halls were empty. But Elder Sajan, awake as always, saw the glint of a dagger beneath torchlight. He shouted, Ravi, behind you. The intruder lunged. Ravi turned just in time, the blade grazing his shoulder. A second strike came, but Mira burst through the doorway, wielding a broom like a spear. She struck the attacker's wrist, sending the weapon clattering across the floor. Guards rushed in. The assassin tried to flee, but was caught. Under torchlight, a medallion fell from his cloak, engraved with Darren's crest. Ravi pressed a cloth to his bleeding arm, his voice steady. Do not harm him, he said. Let him speak before all tomorrow. Myra's hands trembled. You could have been killed. He smiled weakly. If truth lives, death cannot win. Outside, thunder cracked across the sky. The river raged in the distance, mirroring the storm that was about to break inside the palace walls. Sajan knelt beside him. You bleed for justice, my boy, Ravi whispered. Then justice must not bleed for me. At dawn, the assassins stood bound before the palace gates. The entire city gathered, nobles, servants, beggars alike. Ravi, pale but unbroken, faced Darren. Tell them what you ordered. The assassin hesitated, then cried out, It was Lord Darren. He paid us in gold to end your life. Gasps erupted. Darren staggered back, his lies unraveling before the crowd. Ravi lifted a hand. Enough. Let the council decide his fate. But the people roared, demanding punishment. Banish him. Make him sweep as he made others suffer. Ravi raised his voice. Silence. The courtyard fell still. He looked at Darren, trembling, proud no more. I offer you a choice, Ravi said softly. Leave this city forever, or stay, not as lord, but as servant. Learn the labor you despised. Darren sank to his knees, tears mingling with dust. Exile is mercy. Let me go. Ravi nodded. Then go with clean hands, lest the river carry your guilt forever. As guards led Darren away, Ravi turned to the people. Justice is not revenge. It is the cleansing of the heart. The crowd bowed, murmuring prayers of respect. And above them, thunder faded into light. Peace returned once more, but the palace had changed forever. The workers now ruled their hearts with pride, and Mira, once the cruel overseer, became their greatest advocate. Still, Ravi's wound ached. Sajan warned, You carry too much burden, my son. Let others lead for a while. Ravi nodded. Perhaps the river calls me again. He announced a festival, the day of service, to celebrate humility. People from across the land came to witness it. The grand courtyard bloomed with banners, laughter, and songs. Mira organized the workers, ensuring everyone, from cooks to courtiers, shared food and stories. Even the youngest children sang of the janitor who swept his way to greatness. That evening, as lamps glowed along the river, Ravi stood upon the balcony. This day, he declared, shall remind us forever, no work is low, no soul too small to rise. The people cheered. Fireworks blossomed above the palace. Yet, as Ravi looked out at the river's reflection, his gaze softened. Every current must one day return to the sea, he whispered. Sajan overheard and sighed. You mean to leave? Ravi smiled. Only when they no longer need me. The river shimmered, as if it already knew. Months passed. Prosperity bloomed like spring. Under Myra's care, the workers thrived. The merchants, humbled, served the people instead of ruling them. But Ravi grew quieter. Each morning, he walked by the river, listening to its eternal whisper. His eyes, once fiery, now carried the calm of someone who had completed his path. One night, Mira found him sitting beneath the moonlit trees. You've taught us everything, she said softly. Why do you look so distant? Ravi smiled. Because the river calls. It reminds me that peace must flow to other lands too. Tears welled in her eyes. Then let me go with you. He shook his head gently. Your journey is here. Let the Mira. Keep the broom shining, and let no heart grow dusty with pride again. As dawn broke, he left quietly, leaving behind only a single token on his chair, the small wooden charm shaped like a broom. When Mira found it, she pressed it to her chest, whispering, You were never a janitor, Ravi. You were a mirror. The river carried his reflection away, but his story had only just begun to echo. Ravi wandered far from the palace, guided only by the river's whisper. He crossed villages and forests, helping wherever he went, mending a farmer's roof, teaching children letters drawn in the dust, planting seeds in barren fields. People began calling him the sweeper sage. They said wherever he swept, peace followed. Back at the palace, Mira led with fairness and warmth. Yet some nights, she dreamed of the river and woke calling his name. One day, a messenger arrived breathless. My lady, the northern hills are struck by drought. The rivers have turned to stone. Myra's heart tightened. Ravi is there, she whispered. Indeed, far in the dry lands, Ravi knelt beside a cracked riverbed, whispering prayers. The earth thirsts not only for water, but for kindness, he murmured. He began digging a channel with his broom's worn handle, teaching the villagers to follow. For 7 days, they dug until sweat mixed with tears, and on the 7th night, lightning flashed, thunder roared, and rain poured down like forgiveness. The river returned, gentle yet mighty. The people bowed to him. You saved us. Ravi smiled faintly. No, you saved yourselves when you believed a broom could move mountains. News of the miracle spread swiftly. Travelers carried the tale back to Myra's court. The janitor who became steward now walks like a saint. Wherever he goes, rivers awaken. Mira gathered the council. We owe him our hearts. Prepare offerings and send for him. But Elder Sajan raised his hand. Child, some journeys are not meant to return. Rivers flow forward, not backward. Still, Mira could not rest. If he will not come back, then we shall go to him. She traveled with a small group, following stories of blooming villages and flowing wells. At each stop, people spoke of Ravi with reverence. He taught us to work, not wait. He said the earth listens when the heart is clean. Finally, they reached the Valley of Green, once barren, now lush with crops and laughter. Children ran barefoot, calling his name. But Ravi was nowhere. An old woman approached. He left before dawn, she said. Said his broom had one last sweep to make, at the palace that once mocked him. Myra's breath caught. He's coming home. The sky rumbled softly, as though the heavens themselves prepared to witness his final return. When Ravi returned, The city erupted with joy. Crowds lined the streets, tossing petals, singing songs of gratitude. Mira met him at the gates. "You left as a steward," she said through tears, "and return as something greater." Ravi bowed. "Only the broom has changed hands. You hold it now." But the people cried out, "Let him lead. Let him be our chief forever." He raised his hands for silence. "My friends, a true leader is one who makes himself unnecessary. If I have taught you well, you no longer need me to command, only to remind." Still, they pleaded, and so he agreed to stay one more season. During that time, he taught them new ways to harvest, to share, to care. He turned the palace gardens into schools for the poor, and the banquet halls into workshops for learning trades. Mira watched in awe. "You build not walls, but hearts." He smiled gently. "That is the only construction that endures." But beneath his calm, Ravi felt the pull of the river once more. The water's call was growing louder, like the echo of destiny waiting to close its circle. That winter, dark clouds gathered once more. Heavy rains struck the valley without rest. The river that had blessed them now swelled with fury, threatening to drown the city it had saved. Panic spread. Bridges cracked, homes trembled, and the palace itself shook. Mira rushed to Ravi. "The river rises. What do we do?" He looked out through the storm. "The river mirrors the heart of men. Somewhere, someone has forgotten kindness." They climbed the tower. From there, Ravi saw the merchant district, the new lords hoarding grain as the poor fled the flood. He sighed. Even after light, shadows return. He ordered the palace gates opened. "Take all stores of food, give to the people. Let no one starve in fear." The council hesitated. "We'll lose everything. Then we'll save our souls," he replied. As the floodwaters reached the courtyard, Ravi walked barefoot into the rising tide. Mira cried out, "You'll drown." He turned, smiling. "No, I will speak to the river." Lightning flashed, and the waves swallowed his figure. The people fell silent, praying that justice, once again, might bend the storm. The storm raged all night. The river roared, trees tore from their roots, and roofs flew like frightened birds. At dawn, silence. The people searched the flooded plains, and there upon a hill stood Ravi, drenched but unbroken, his broom planted deep in the mud like a staff. Around him, the waters had parted, flowing harmlessly around the city's edge. Mira ran to him. "You stopped the flood." He smiled faintly. "No, I only asked the river to remember." The people knelt in awe. Children touched his robe, whispering, "He speaks with water." But Ravi's strength waned. His steps faltered, his skin pale. Sajan rushed forward. "You've given too much, my son." Ravi sank to his knees, looking at the river now calm and glimmering. "It takes what it gives," he murmured. "That is the balance." Mira caught him as he collapsed. "Stay with us. The city needs you." He touched her hand weakly. "Then promise me, keep the broom high. Sweep not only floors, but hearts." As the morning sun broke through the clouds, his eyes closed peacefully. The river shimmered gold, carrying his reflection once more. The city mourned as though the sun had dimmed. Bells tolled, not in sorrow alone, but in gratitude. The people carried Ravi's broom through the streets like a sacred relic. Mira led the procession, tears mixing with rain. "He swept away our pride," she whispered, "and left us clean." They built no statue, no marble tomb. Instead, they planted trees along the riverbank, one for every servant who ever lived unseen. Years passed. Children grew hearing his tale. The palace became a sanctuary of service, where each worker, no matter their role, began their day sweeping a single step in his honor. And every year on the day of service, Mira would stand by the river and tell his story of a man mocked for his lowly broom who rose to cleanse not just floors, but souls. Some nights, when the moon hung low, villagers swore they saw a figure walking along the water's edge, sweeping the stars' reflections. The old called it myth, the young called it hope. But Mira, smiling through age and memory, would simply whisper, he never left. He only became the river. Time rolled on like gentle water. The palace flourished under Myra's wisdom, and the workers became the heart of the land. One day, a wandering noble arrived, a man with weary eyes and tattered robes. None recognized him, until Myra looked closely. "Darren," she whispered. He nodded weakly. "The years have not been kind." He fell to his knees. "I came to ask forgiveness. The greed I fed devoured me. I lost my home, my pride, my peace." Myra helped him rise. "Forgiveness was given long ago by the man you tried to destroy." Tears streamed down Darren's face. "Then let me serve, if only for one day." She handed him a broom. "Then sweep with us. Let the dust remember mercy." And so, the once proud lord cleaned the palace floors, beside the workers he had scorned. As he swept, the river outside shimmered softly, as though in quiet approval. That evening, Darren laid down the broom and smiled faintly. "I am free." He passed peacefully in his sleep that night, his heart finally lighter than dust. Myra looked skyward. Even the hardest stone can be shaped by kindness. Many seasons later, Myra grew old. On her final evening, she asked to be carried to the riverbank. The air smelled of jasmine and memory. Children gathered around her. "Tell us again," they begged, "the story of the janitor who became a king." Her voice, though frail, carried the same warmth as firelight. "He was no king," she said. "He was a mirror. He showed us what we truly were and what we could be." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the river glowed like molten gold. A soft breeze stirred the trees. Myra closed her eyes. "Listen closely," she whispered. "Do you hear it?" The children tilted their heads. Somewhere, faint but clear, came the sound of sweeping, a rhythm gentle as breath, eternal as the tide. She smiled. "That is him, still keeping the world clean." Her last words lingered in the air. "Remember, children, no work is too small, no heart too low to rise." When dawn broke, a single broom stood upright beside the river, glistening with dew. The people found it there and bowed deeply. And from that day onward, they called the river the sweep of heaven.